and welcome to the 495. I am your host, Doug Sparks, editor-in-chief of Merrimack Valley Magazine. Lou, how are you doing this week?
I'm doing all right.
Yeah?
I'm ready for Christmas to be over.
Are you ready for it to be over?
I'm ready to be over. I'm ready for 2020 to be over. I'm ready to move on.
Yeah, I'm in that weird timeless space where it's like tomorrow, next week, 2020, 2021. It's all a blur. My kids get up earlier and earlier and stay up later and later, so it's like it's all just some sort of stream that I'm riding in at this point.
So you didn't ascend with the Grand Conjunction?
I did not.
No.
You know, it's funny. So in January, I wrote probably, it's not going to seem this way until you kind of dig into it, but I wrote what I think is my craziest, and some of them are crazy.
Yeah.
The craziest letter from the editor I've ever written. Because I had this
letter from
the editor for Merrimack Valley Magazine. Yep. So I had this weird thing that happened for maybe like the past 3 months. And I love music. I listen to all types of music, and the only thing I could listen to was like Baroque and Renaissance, like early music. It was the only thing that sounded good.
Possessed you for a while?
Yeah. Everything else sounded horrible. Mm-hmm. So I was. And then, so you start doing that. It's like everything sounds bad. And then there's just one little teeny type of music that sounds like, puts me in religious ecstasy. Like, I just love it, right? And then you start to question, well, why? Why this type of music? And I was reading Shakespeare, of all people.
Okay.
And I was reading Shakespeare because there's so much good free Shakespeare on YouTube right now. Mm-hmm. And I was reminded of this idea of the harmony of the spheres. Do you know about this?
The harmony of the spheres.
There's this idea during the English Renaissance, during that time period. It actually goes way back before that the Earth is at the center of the universe, and all the planets and even a thing called heaven spins around in these orbits, and it creates a harmony. It creates a music, and it's very, very beautiful. And normally everything's too noisy, everything's too loud for us to hear it. But you kind of hear this in the music. This is what Renaissance and early Baroque music is like. It's like these intricate spheres kind of rotating, but creating this kind of blissful harmony. And I was like, well, that's it. It's like 2020 was such a crazy year with so much contention and so much anxiety about things. So of course this one music where everything's kind of sphere shaped and circular and working in these component parts would give me this thing that I needed to step outside of 2020.
Well, I'm a collective consciousness guy.
Okay, well, this is kind of part of it. It's the
there has
idea
been havoc in the collective consciousness for the year.
Right. You know. So how do you balance that off?
Something harmonizes it all, right?
Yeah.
And it tunes us all in.
Yeah, and the thing is, they thought this sound was a literal sound. Like you could go out into a field at night. You can go into a farm and just stand there and look up at the stars, and if you're quiet enough, you would hear this beautiful kind of humming sound. So that's what I wrote. It's actually much crazier than that. I'm making it sound almost like it makes sense. This was
they had mead right back then.
What's that? Yeah, exactly. A lot of mead, a lot of wine, for sure. So speaking of the harmony of the spheres, our guest today is named as Chath Piersath, and he is a poet. He's a painter. He's a farmer. He's a community advocate. He's a lot of things. His latest book of poetry and sketches is called On Earth, Beneath Sky. Chath, how are you today?
Good, how are you?
I'm doing great. I don't know why I'm doing great, but I'm doing great.
Great to see you.
It's great to see you, too. I mean, it's always strange when you read someone and then you have an idea of them. And some of your work is confessional, so it's like, I feel like I kind of know you, but I haven't spoken to you. And still, even now, we have this disconnect. Because it's all virtual, right? Which is different from sitting down and having a cup of tea or going apple picking together, for sure. So this came out recently on the Loom Press. How did you get involved? And Loom Press, for people who don't know, is a local press, puts out a lot of great stuff by local writers. You should check them out. How did you get involved with the Loom Press?
Well, I used to live in Lowell, so I knew Paul Merriam very well. We were in the same graduate class. At UMass Lowell, and he involved me with the literary community there. And I lived in Lowell for 7 years, and then after that, I've been living on the farm here. And so I got in touch with him and talked to him about a manuscript and to seek his advice for where to send my manuscript. So he said, well, publish with us.
Yeah.
So so from then on, I started to work with the manuscript with him, and then came the book.
Yeah. This is not your first book.
Yes, this is my third book, actually.
Okay. And can you tell us a little bit about 1 and 2?
My first one was called After, and it's basically a book of letters. I tried to, because when I came to the US, there was no communication with my mom, with my sibling. So I tried to imagine what if I wrote them letters. So basically it was a book of letters addressing to different members of my families, including my mother and my father.
Yeah. And so for people who don't know who you are, and you say when you came to the United States, where were you coming to the United States from, and when was this?
I came from Cambodia. Originally, I was born there, and I came to the United States in 1981 at the age of 10. And I was based first in Boulder, Colorado, and then I lived in Colorado until I graduated from high school, and then I went to college in California.
Yeah. So what was it like at the age of 10, moving to Boulder from Cambodia? That must have been like just a crazy shock, or just a change. Like, it's unfathomable to me, having grown up in the Merrimack Valley and still being in the Merrimack Valley.
Yeah, it was a great cultural shock for me, because I wasn't aware of the United States, because I was living in a very small village. There was no electricity, no running water. So a lot of things that I've seen, I've never been on a plane, or I've never been inside of a car. So imagine just coming into the airport, seeing a lot of different people, and I was taking it all in. I was like trying to absorb everything.
Yeah. Now, as this process is happening, your brain can go in a lot of different ways, right? You're being formed at this point, right? And
Yes.
who knows? You could have designed airplanes, or you could have built skyscrapers, or there's all different ways you could have gone. But somehow, at least one of your paths ultimately leads to poetry and writing. So what set you on that path?
Well, when I was younger, I was trying to learn English, and somehow I started to, as a learning process, I started to write journal. So I kept reading. I read a lot, and I just wrote anything, and I was mostly very alone. So writing was a way for me to actually cope, or do something to remember my own feeling. So that was how I got started, and I read a lot of literature, and so one day I said I wanted to write also, to tell my story.
Do you still is solitude still part of the equation? Do you need solitude to write? Is that something you've kind of left behind?
Well, you don't really need solitude to write, but yeah, when you write, you are in a solitary mode. And oftentimes what you write about, sometimes you write about what you know, and so that can bring a lot of like this sense of solitude in your life.
Sure. So I wanted to ask you about two figures who come into this to this book, Jack Kerouac and Walt Whitman, as people who obviously you've read, and they're sort of ghosts in this book. They sort of haunt the worldview you have here. And let's start with Kerouac. Were you reading Kerouac when you were young? Like what's your relationship with Jack Kerouac? And for people who don't know Jack Kerouac's a Lowell. He's a Merrimack Valley guy.
Yes, I read him in high school, but I couldn't really grasp that much of his writing, or or his life, his writing style, until I came to law as an adult, and I started to reread him, and then realized that he had been to a lot of places that I also been, and I was kind of surprised that I ended up in law in his hometown, and a lot of his writing, he always mentioned law somehow, like he always put the city in there, and so that's how I got involved with the Kerouac project in law, and I was able to read Dr. Nikotopoulos, to whom I dedicate this book to. He was always there to support me, and Paul Merriam was integral in getting me involved in the community, in law, in the literary community. So that's how I realized, when I reread him again, I realized how much he loved law. And I started to think about how I would continue writing about law, or about where I've been, or about the places that I have seen or experienced myself.
Yeah, so that's interesting to me, because for you, Kerouac is very much about like place and travel. I feel like Kerouac is an interesting figure because his cultural relevance is a little fraught right now. Like, I feel like when I was in high school, I read Kerouac and I loved Kerouac. It was liberating for me. It was like lightning in a bottle, and it changed my life in probably some minor ways, but it changed my life. Years later, when I was teaching college English, I had my students read Kerouac, and I don't think there was a single student who liked Kerouac. I don't think he spoke to them at that particular point, and I think he doesn't speak to a lot of young people, and he continues to speak to some, and the reasons are sort of interesting. I mean, I remember students in the class. This was in Staten Island. I was teaching college at Staten Island. I remember students saying, like, this guy's like, he's talking about freedom and liberty, but he's just taking these kind of underage girls up into the, the mountains and taking advantage of them. And they saw it as exploitation. They saw it from a very different perspective. And I'm wondering, like, do you have a fraught relationship with Kerouac? Do you sometimes say, oh, there's things about him that are a little bit uncomfortable, or are you just separating the wheat from the chaff in the things that speak to you? Everything else is irrelevant.
Well, I think of him and his writing as a period base, because during his generation, we scholar name it as the Beat generation, and I think during that time, he lived his life accordingly, and I think in regard to what he write about freedom and liberty, to me, it's still relevant today, because those are important things to express and to be and to do things that pull you in. And so I think, it's a different, we're now in a different generation altogether, like in the computer age and internet and all that stuff. So maybe he's not that relevant to a lot of young people, but for me, I find relevant because of the way he wrote, the way he lived his life, and the way he documented things and the places he's been, and also he seek philosophical, Eastern philosophical ideas. He so to me, it's more like his period, his life, and his adventure, and he document all of it.
Yeah. Hey, actually, you bring up the spiritual component, and I want to ask you about that in your own work. This idea of prayers and intonation comes up over and over again in On Earth Beneath Sky. Do you see a religious dimension to poetry?
Oh yeah, I mean, the Bible is almost poetic. or I mean, a lot of the religious texts are poems, basically, because you invoke the spirit, you invoke the God, you invoke the spirit of Christ, the spirit of Buddha, whoever that you believe in. And I think that, when you say prayer, it's like you're reciting a poem.
Now, on the other side of things, the political side, we have this other figure who I see coming up again and again in your poetry, Walt Whitman. What's your relationship with Walt Whitman?
Well, Walt Whitman, again, when I was in high school, I didn't get him at all because his language, it was pretty sophisticated, even though it's very American, very, very expressive. But later in my life, when I reread him again, I really got him, and I can see where he's at or what he was writing. And a lot of time, what he writing was way ahead. Like he write as if he tell you to participate in what he seeing or what he desire, and it, to me, that was just like way ahead of time. And to this day, many people read him and they still he really moved them.
Yeah. There was something that struck me as unexpected in your poems, which was a sense of something that I would call, and maybe just the term that I would use, in a complicated way, it's as being patriotic. And I don't feel like you see patriotism addressed in this way a lot in contemporary poetry. Do you consider on some level these patriotic poems? Do you consider your relationship to the United States as an idea?
Oh yeah, I mean, to me, I guess sometimes Americans, they need to be reminded of what the freedom and the liberty they have, and in a way, I write to remind them that where I'm from, the sense of freedom and liberty weren't there when I was growing up. So here in the United States, it's a big country, but yet you can be invisible, but you can feel free. You can be yourself. You can seek your own identity. You can find ways to participate in your country, political, social, and economic well-being. So yes, in a way, you can say it's patriotic. And one of the poems I actually wrote is called "America, My America," which I speak to that kind of, maybe it's patriotic. Yes.
Yeah. So according to a bio of you I found on the internet, you split your time between Massachusetts on a farm, and we'll talk about that, and Phnom Penh in Cambodia. Is that still the case? Do you still have half the time?
I'm not in Cambodia as long as I used to be.
Yeah.
Because now I come in February to prune the tree.
Yeah.
So yeah. So before I used to do 6 months. I didn't come until like maybe April.
Okay.
But now they need me more, like, to prune the tree.
So before we get to the trees, because I'm sure people are now curious, I just wonder what that's like to live part of the time in, Bolton, right? Bolton, Mass, and part of the time in Phnom Penh. Do you start to, like, just on a day-to-day level, when you get to Phnom Penh, is it like, I finally get to go to this cafe and I get to walk on the streets and I get to see these people and this is really neat. And then there are kind of the annoying things. And then you come back to the United States and it's like, I get to, like, eat at this burger place. That's great. And then there are also the kind of, like, cons, the negatives. Do you like, I'm just kind of curious about the way you feel, like, the contrast between these two places.
Well, the contrast is very stark. And it's like when I'm in Cambodia, I miss the United States. And when I'm in the United States, I kind of think about Cambodia and the condition it is in. Because I feel like, in a way, because I was privileged, or I was granted a chance to get an education here. And I feel somewhat obligated to be in Cambodia in some way to help to bring knowledge or to bring things that I know to the country. And I think by doing so, I also contribute to American way of life, or American global peace. So I feel like it's hard to go between these two countries because they're so different. But at the same time, it gave me a chance to learn how to adapt and change between places. And I also travel to other places also, not just Cambodia.
So how does this how does all this lead to farming? How did you become how did you go from poetry and sort of literary experiences, and we'll talk about the art too, to being a fruit farmer, which is what you do, right? Apples, peaches, and some vegetables, right? So where does fruit farming come into this?
Well, I used to do environmental justice in Lowell, Massachusetts, and I started to volunteer when I met Ken, one of the four brothers, and he was volunteering for UMass Extension program. So we toured the Hmong farm, in Bolton, with Secretary Schumacher, and there was a government program it's called the New Farmer Initiative Program, which trying to get people from farming background to access land so they can farm here in the United States. So the Hmong flat was run by Maria, and that was one of the programs that was showcased to the secretary. So I went there and I met Ken, and then I learned about his farm, and I started to volunteer for them on the weekends, because since I was a young boy, I grew stuff. I like to farm. I like to forage for food, and so I've always liked to be in nature.
Yeah, I mean, it sounds. I don't know if I'm being idealistic, but a fruit farm in Bolton sounds like a great place to get writing done.
Oh yeah. Even the work is hard, but it's very peaceful and quiet. And during my spare time in the evening, I would just write, or in the morning, I would just write a bit.
Yeah. And we spoke about this before the show, but the listeners didn't get this. What's the name of the farm? Because you do have tours there, and people post-COVID will be able to go and pick your own.
It's called the Nishwe Family Farm. It's spelled NICEWICZ. And their father's side come from Poland, and the farm started in 1929. And if you go to the website nishwefamilyfarm.com, you will learn about the history of the farm.
Yeah. So there's this whole other side of you that we haven't really started discussing yet, which is you're also a painter, and your work has been shown around the world.
Yes.
In fact, this is one of your paintings, right?
Yes.
And I, know your stuff from now Instagram. I'm following you on Instagram, so I can see that. I wonder if I detect a very different sense from the paintings than I do from the poetry, and maybe you can talk about this. To me, your paintings seem very like dark and almost kind of frightening at times. There's a horror, almost what I would call like a horror element to them. It seems like you're really getting into the like subconscious with some of the painting. Am I onto something? Do you see there being a split there too?
Yeah, a lot of my visual rendering concerned with the subconscious, dream, the past, and also what I'm feeling about the world at the moment, like what's happening. around me, and oftentimes it has to do a lot with Cambodia and what I've seen there.
Yeah. So there's a political, or I'll ask it as a question: is there a political dimension to your painting?
Oh yeah, I mean a lot of my visual art is very political because I want to show people that this is what little poor people are feeling and doing. You're doing this and doing that. You should be looking at people.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? But helping people. So I'm trying to point out the reality that I see on a daily basis.
You do something I really like in your paintings, and I'm not an artist, but I remember, I would take art classes, and I would do this thing, and how somebody along the way tells you, no, don't do that thing. So you stop doing it for no reason other than that one guy told you to stop doing it, which is I used to like drawing things and then writing words, because I'm a word guy, right? You do that. You integrate text into the painting, and then I see it. I always think, why was I told not to do that? That works. Yeah. It's actually very powerful.
I was told that also. I did an exhibition in Cambodia one time to include my poetry, and this one guy walked up to me. He was like, "Oh, your visual art is stronger. You didn't need the poem there." I'm like, yeah, that's okay. I mean, but I like to integrate it, Yeah. And I think putting words in painting also is an art form, because you put something in there and it's part of that painting, and the word can be part of a painting. Why not, right?
Sure. Yeah, so I have one more question, and then Lou's going to have some questions for you. And then I was hoping when we end, you'll read a poem for us. And the final question I have before I turn this over to Lou is, even though, at least in my mind, I kind of perceive this darkness or this flowing of the, kind of dark, horrific stuff in the painting, is there a relationship between the poetry, beyond the words, beyond the language, between your artistic vision as a poet, as a writer, and what you're doing as a painter?
But like poetry is also visual. You have to show feeling. You have to demonstrate like something, whether it's joy or whether it's hate, whether it's love. You show in the things that yeah, I'm just you make the point that it's visual, and then all of a sudden I'm like, oh wow, like I know exactly what you're saying in terms of your own work. Yeah, so sometimes if I paint something, I'll write something about the painting, but in word, describing the character in that painting, what that character is feeling or thinking.
If you had to do one, if for some reason all of a sudden you have very little free time and you can only paint or you can only write, which do you go with?
I think sometimes painting is easier. So sometimes I go to painting because writing is like you have to really think hard.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, people don't get this sometimes. They think it's just like
Yeah. I would go to painting first.
Yeah. Lou, do you have any questions for our guest this
week?
Yeah,
let's start there with the writing process, because this fascinates me, because people who edit me would tell me that English is my second language occasionally. But writing in a second language, writing is hard, and it's exceptionally hard. And writing in a second language to me would seem to be exponentially harder than that. Talk about the writing process in a second language.
Well, a lot of great writers now are writing in second language. English is a second language. And English is pretty hard. And sometimes, like when I write, I think in Khmer, in my mother tongue. Even though I'm not literate in Khmer, English is really the first language that I'm literate in. So I read everything in English. I write in English. I dream in English. So yeah, it's difficult. But then the more I write, the easier it gets.
To just pin that down a little bit, you said it's the language you're literate in. That's the one you learned to write in. You spoke a language before English, though, right?
Yes.
Yeah, but you became literate in English.
Yes.
Oh,
In terms of writing and reading.
And it must be, from a poetic standpoint and from a philosophical standpoint, if I can get that grand with it, it must be another fascinating process, because the whole idea of getting thoughts to words is an intensely important part of processing your emotions and your thoughts and artwork. Doing it, do you have to do it in two steps? In other words, do you think your thoughts in your first language and then have to reprocess the words again to find the appropriate word in English?
No, I just write straight in English.
Interesting. And if I have the numbers right, you came to America at 11 years old.
Yeah, 10 or 11,
Yeah, in 81, so you've been here 40 years. And I want to know, because you have a unique perspective on American culture, I would think. And I want to know your evolution of, there are probably a couple evolutions going on here. The evolution of your opinion of American culture and how you viewed it. The evolution of you being an observer of American culture and becoming part of American culture. And how we've changed, how American culture has changed in that time. So talk to me about your viewpoint of America in the time you've been here.
Well, there are music, literature that are indigenous to America. You know what I mean?
Mm-hmm.
And America is only maybe 200 years old, 200 or more years old.
Right.
And it's a young country, and it's very diverse. The demographic is growing and more diverse. And so the idea of America is, the physical reality of America is very diverse, right? But then this ideal of America is we are united. Like those who came to the United States, they want to become a part of this American culture, this notion of freedom, this notion of democracy, this notion of education, to be able to thrive and prosper. That's the world wonders, you know. And I think because the U.S. system has been set in a way that it has been ingrained from generation to generation, no matter what, we will always go back to that source, the Constitution, the foundation that the forefather had laid down. And so I feel like America is a place for many, many people in the world. And they came looking for that one ideal of being an American. But as an American, there isn't one homogeneous culture of American. The homogeneous culture of being American is that constitutional ideal of being, of economic freedom, of liberty and justice, the sense of be able to assemble, be able to write, read, and speak your mind. Those are the things that a lot of countries in the world don't have.
Thank you for that, because as being immersed in American culture all my life, I feel we're losing that. Do you believe that that American ideal is being kept alive by people coming into the country and being attracted to it more than it is people who were raised in the country? Because it seems from my end sometimes that we're kind of losing grip on that American ideal, or we're starting to villainize that American ideal.
Yeah, I don't think we will lose that American ideal. I think it's up to us to instill in our children this ideal, this notion of independence and freedom, and that they should not be taken for granted. And because it is ingrained in our system. Even if we have a dictator ruling us tomorrow, we will find a way to topple that dictator. You know what I mean?
Yeah. That sounds like the part of American culture that you've embraced the most. What's the part of American culture that you've rejected the most, that you find the most troubling?
I think the I think today it's especially hard because the divide is huge, and the political process isn't very genuine, and the system is growing very complex now. It's getting larger and larger beyond the ordinary control of the small ordinary people. And I think that we're also losing literacy. The way there are people who are not as literate in their own economic, social, and political well-being. So if we lose that literacy, we can put our country in danger. And so I think that maybe we can rethink about how we educate the young people.
Couldn't agree more.
Yeah. So to end the show, would you be kind enough to read a poem from the new book?
Okay, I will read America, My America, since we're talking about patriotism.
That's good. I mentioned it in the review too, so
okay,
which you'll see in the March issue.
America, my America, indebted to you, America. My eyes are enough, for I have seen freedom. My heart you can take, for I have felt hatred and war. My gratitude in every limb born to you and for you, perhaps is all I have to give. Take my ears, for I have heard the Liberty Bell of Mount Rushmore. Make me a donor. Take my spleen, kidneys, and lungs. My privileged American life can take my eyes, after all. My arms and legs I am willing to sacrifice. Let me die for freedom and democracy, for peace and prosperity, justice and liberty for all. I salute you, America, for helping my dream take flight. Let me be, see, and become, to work and play, eat and sleep to life, breathlessly beautiful hills, mountains, valleys, above and below. This land is your land. This land is my land, field to field, from California to the New York Island, wheat and rye, Iowan corn, grassland, native sacred paradise, on earth and beyond the sky, galaxy and beyond every universe man must explore, stars and planets near and far. To every free spirit may American-born freedom roar, echoing far and wide until all tyranny be gone, like doubts and fears, gone from the ears I have given America, from the eyes that witness human cruelty, from the heart that felt freedom, the highway paved for kings and queens, the magician who appears and disappears by his own magic. I give all of me, the entirety. Claim me, America, a sacrifice worth more than the life I knew before.
Well, thank you so much for coming on
Thank
the
you.
495. I appreciate it. It's been fantastic. I hope everyone, I encourage you to head over to the Loom Press website and order a copy of the new book, On Earth Beneath Sky. And happy holidays, everyone. And happy holidays, Chath. I really appreciate it. Lou?
Thank
Have
you.
a great Christmas.
Merry Christmas.
Thanks again. I appreciate
Merry
it.
Christmas.
All right. Thank you.